adapt, adjust to open up, to engage more with our audiences and with our communities and fulfill our public purposes. So how can we do this differently?
Thank you very much. Martin Knight, you like the BBC, now have an ownership position as part of this patchwork quilt of ownerships in the area. How's it looking?
Well, let me just say a few words about Imperial College and its presence in Hammersmith. The heart of Imperial College has traditionally been seen as being in South Kensington. The Exhibition Road site is the heart. It's where Imperial was really formed from the Prince Albertopolis vision. But our turnover has doubled in the last 5 years, and it's doubled on exactly the same space, the same built space. And we need room for expansion. Now, we looked at a number of different sites, but the site that we alighted on was the Woodlands site, which Chris and I negotiated and we purchased from the BBC. And the reason why we purchased it and came here was because very close, 500 metres from the Woodlands site, is a building or a set of buildings called the Hammersmith Hospital, which is part of the Imperial College Healthcare Trust, the biggest trust in the country. And right next door to the Hammersmith Hospital is the single biggest medical research facility in Europe, which is the Imperial College Medical Campus. And that's where really groundbreaking medical research takes place. There is really hardly a medical researcher of renown in this country that has not spent some time during their career at the Hammersmith Medical Research Campus. And so, from our point of view, to find room for expansion and to establish, as Stephen said, the lung for the expansion of Imperial College and its research and teaching activities was just wonderful in Hammersmith. What we want to develop at Woodlands, which is the site we bought from the BBC, the former site of BBC Worldwide, the brown, rather low-rise, brown, not terribly attractive buildings, I have to say, immediately opposite BBC Centre. What we want to develop there is a major accommodation, education and research establishment to make it essentially the second campus for Imperial College. So we're going to be in the borough of Hammersmith and we're going to be in White City for as long as you can possibly imagine. We've been in South Kensington for over 100 years. No reason to think we're not going to be in Hammersmith for a further 100 years. So we're not here. You used the word property deal. This isn't a property deal as far as we're concerned. This is a locational establishment reality. What we want to do is we want to get on with the development. We have an urgent need to expand our facilities, and the speed at which we want to move. People don't think universities can move quickly, but we actually want to move very quickly indeed, and we want to see some practical results. We want to start the demolition, we want to start the process of building the new development as quickly as we can. Just one other point which I'd like to raise, which is this question of the creative aspect, the creative agenda. I think if you said to the researchers at our medical facility in Hammersmith, or if you said to the engineering researchers or the life science physicists, the biologists at Imperial College, that they weren't creative, that somehow there was something other than creative about what they did, I think they'd be absolutely amazed. The people who invent a cure for rheumatoid arthritis, the person who, through his PhD thesis, created the beginning of the LED screen that everybody uses or will use. These are people who work at Imperial College. They regard themselves as quintessentially creative. And related to that, we set up a company called Imperial Innovations, which is now quoted on the stock exchange, and you can buy shares in it if you want. And that company has the task of commercially exploiting the intellectual property created by Imperial College scientists. And one of the things that we've done that's been extremely attractive is we set up a small bioincubator unit in South Kensington. It has 12 companies in it, and they turn over on a regular basis. One of the things that we want to do in Woodlands is to provide second stage incubation activity. And we think that's going to be a really powerful driver in terms of taking intellectual property, transforming it into businesses, employment, and wealth.
Thank you very much. Now, there's a curious connection between Imperial and actually the organisation that Deyan heads, because when the Imperial Institute on Exhibition Road was sold to Imperial College for expansion and demolished, and in fact the Campanile on the South Kensington site is the memory of that building. Some of the money raised by the sale was then used to create the Commonwealth Institute, into which the Design Museum is eventually going to go. And I think the interesting thing about this is the extent to which any sort of building in London may find that its redundancy triggers off something more appropriate and more creative in the end. So that your connections to this site and the creation of a second campus, I think is very interesting. Deyan is now creating a sort of second campus site for the Design Museum, which began life in Docklands east of Tower Bridge. Deyan, thoughts on perhaps a wider view about creativity in London and where we stand and how we can promote and encourage?
About every 3 weeks, I get a delegation to the museum from Shenzhen or Taichung or Kuala Lumpur of people who are anxiously looking at how they can create a creative hub in their city. They've heard what London's done, they've seen some of the papers that come out of the country here, and they say, how do we do that too? It's a universal phenomenon because manufacturing economies naturally want to migrate up the food chain to create those better paid jobs. I think the fact is that these hubs, these creative focuses, don't last. If you actually look at how design, architecture, creativity have flourished over the last century, they tend to be focused on particular cities at particular moments, much less than particular countries. If I was asked to talk about what is British design, I'd be hard put to understand what it might be. Is the Mini owned by Germans, designed by Americans, actually a British product? Was the original Mini designed by Alex Sigonis, Greek origin, Turkish refugee to London, a British design? I think you can, I would say, there's something much more coherent about a city that has that ecology, that gene pool of education opportunities, of somewhere for graduates from those colleges to stay after they graduated, to attract more graduate students, that next generation. And I think the challenge for London is how to go on doing that. Design Museum has actually been migrating west and east across London. It began actually as a project in the bowels of the Victorian Albert Museum 25 years ago, in response to Terence Conran's belief that Victorian Albert, which was originally started as a institution organised by the government to try and give manufacturing in this country a better leg up to compete with Prussia, France, Austria-Hungary. Now, of course, we're going to compete with Korea, China, and so on. It's still trying to do those things. But DNA became something else. So the Design Museum began there as a chance to say this is what creativity means in a contemporary sense. We went to Shad Thames in Sudjic, and we had 25 years there. And it's interesting, we were earlier talking about how planners tend to fight the battles of the next war. The tactics, the last one. One of the things I found in the filing cabinet when I got there was a letter from Southwark's chief planner in response to a request to change the use of the building we're in, which used to be a banana ripening warehouse, into a museum. And the chief planner said, well, unfortunately, we're not the planning authority. There was something called London Dockland Development Corporation. But if we were, I have to tell you that we would refuse replication because we are protecting the jobs that banana ripening warehouse rather than trying to encourage culture-led renewal, which has now become the only game in town. I think we're very good at building university campuses. We know what a business park looks like, we know how to build it. We know what a shopping mall is like, we know what office towers are like, we know how to fund and build them. What we're not so good at is building cities, which is really what this all comes down to. Cities are places which allow people to be themselves, to ignore each other if they want to choose what they need from a city. And that's the hardest thing to get right. And I think that needs to be based on understanding what is this quality of cityness, which to me I think is about choice, about freedom, also the possibility for change. One of the most hopeful things I've seen in West London since I've been coming to the site is the Whitelist Mall, where what was McDonald's is now becoming a decent restaurant here.
Thank you very much. Stephen, can I pick up a couple of those points with you? Firstly, this question of enabling choice and encouraging it. Now, this is not necessarily the easiest thing in the world. The bigger the scheme, the more opponents there are bound to be. I think Earls Court has already got some sort of Elgin Crescent Brigade in a bit of a flurry. And of course, you know, we're all NIMBYs, nobody wants a building site next door to them. I mean, it's a completely understandable condition. How do you deal with this thorny question of major regeneration, extra homes, extra jobs, with the understandable desires of local people not to be disturbed?
Well, it's not easy, but I've been learning a lot by spending a kind of fortnightly meeting with Terry Farrell thinking about the Earls Court project, and the thing that he emphasises is that nothing